It looks like she's coming in right now.
Okay.
There
Somebody-
she-
Yeah, okay, I
We
see.
have everybody.
Looks like recording has started, shows here on mine, I guess. All right, it's close enough to 1 o'clock. Let's go ahead and call it meeting to order at 1 o'clock. First step is the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any additions or comments on the agenda?
Looks good to me.
Okay, if there are no changes or comments to it, we'll proceed from there as approved. The minutes have been previously distributed for the January 7th meeting. Are there any corrections, additions, comments on that?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, so all in favor can please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, I'm going to make it a unanimous approval. Any public comments? I don't see anybody else unless I'm missing somebody.
Oh, where'd Jim go?
There's no public, but we just lost our chair.
Yeah, where'd he go?
That was a short meeting.
Yeah. So who's next in charge? No.
Yeah.
Oh, here he comes.
Okay, operator error. I somehow hit the wrong button.
Oh,
I don't see anybody for public comments, so we'll continue on past that. One comment before we get started. Well, I got a couple of comments, really. Meeting materials were posted on the website, on our page of the website, in addition to the agenda. The two documents that were posted or are posted are the bylaws review status, which is an Excel spreadsheet, and then the more extensive bylaws proposals document. One of them can be opened. I don't remember which. One of them can be opened as you click on it on the association website. The other you have to download, I guess, to be able to open it. But they are posted on the association website under the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee page for anybody who is watching now or looks at the video later on can follow perhaps a little bit better what we're talking about or what we've been talking about. One comment on the review status is that there's what amounts to a typographical error. The left-hand column for each of the bylaws topics underneath the bylaws section has a page number. That's intended to be the page number of the proposals document where that topic is discussed. Unfortunately, I inadvertently made the cover sheet of the proposals document, the one that includes all of the details of a proposal. Unfortunately, I made that page 1, which means the status spreadsheet is off. The page numbers are off by 1. Instead of page 1, it should be page 2, page 3, so forth on down the list. I'll correct that with the next update. But the easiest thing appears to be just to change the page numbers on the status as opposed to try to delete the number from the cover sheet. Before we get too far into this, the intention was to start reviewing the proposals as they are on the proposals document, which runs now about 17, 18 pages. However, Colette and I had a phone call conversation in the last hour or so, and I'm going to briefly summarize it. And Colette, if I go off the wrong way, say something that's not quite correct, please stop me as I go.
okay.
Colette, Frank Daly, and Jeremy Tucker have recently met and reviewed the Frank Daly, I'll refer to them as proposals, as well as our proposal as we discussed and submitted at the last meeting. And without trying to go into them in details, although Colette has forwarded to me 6 different documents of her handwritten notes, which I have not had a chance to look at yet, but can pass on. But Jeremy Tucker will take the proposals from Frank and the proposal from us as went from us in the last meeting and blend them together and document proposals to go to before the board at its next regular meeting in February, which I believe is like the February 22nd. The bottom line, if I can put it that way, is that Jeremy has both sets of proposals and he will be he will be preparing specific proposals based on those inputs from Frank Daly and from us, and make changes, alterations, however you want to describe it, as he believes is appropriate and can be supported. And Colette, if I've misstated something in that, would you please straighten me out? Or did we lose her?
I know she's muted, I think.
I have construction going on here, so I have to mute out sometimes when it gets noisy.
Okay,
So Jeremy will be giving us the language to put in motions to the board for each of these changes. And Frank hopes that your final recommendations and Jeremy's will be back to us soon enough for us to have a special meeting prior to our February meeting to act on these motions. If not, it will be in the February meeting. Both he and Jeremy believe that we should move speedily forward to try to get these bylaws changes completed so that they will be in force. Whatever is approved will be in force for the upcoming election. I also reviewed with them the documents that are being put before the board as discussion topic, those resolution changes that we discussed last time in the candidate verification form that Keith prepared and you guys discussed. And the only changes to that may be in the candidate verification section, the questions about qualifications, that there may be additional qualifications that come out of this or changes in wording, some things that Keith had put in this section that would be informational only. Some of those may be moved into the yes, no qualification questions above. So that is all kind of TBD at this point. I thought I would have received by today Jeremy's updates, but I did not.
okay. Anybody have any questions on what's happened so far?
If I may, I just want to make sure I'm a little clear. The material that Jeremy is now going to put together includes what we have referred to as the daily proposal, plus the proposal that we considered with various changes to Article 5 of the bylaws. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's all that he's working on at the moment that is the subject of this conversation.
Yes.
Okay, and then when you say he's going to come back hopefully before the February meeting, is he coming back with a document to the board or to the board and this committee?
It will come to me and Frank, and then for us it will actually go to the board.
Okay.
Because the idea being that we want to proceed timely toward getting the referendum started.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anybody else with a comment? Question? Okay, let's go on from there. Let's go through the proposals as they exist in the proposals document. This is the dated, I believe, January 15th. Yeah. The first item is one that we've gone through previously. Yeah, can you scroll through it, Josh? Okay. This was intended to address the eligibility to, or eligible to vote issue. Now, it also has in there a revision or proposed revision to 502A. I believe that's also addressed in there, is addressed in the proposal that we sent, that was reviewed along with the Frank Daly proposal with the attorney Jeremy Tucker. So the 502A part of that, I think, can be set aside. However, we have additional sections in there that are intended to clarify the eligible to vote provision. That includes that an additional new definition of eligible to vote. And then it also has changes to a couple of other provisions, other sections in which the term eligibility to vote is removed and replaced with eligible to vote. Those are kind of cleanup provisions so that we don't have two different kinds of references in the bylaws, one eligible to vote and the other eligibility to vote. I believe that with the exception of 502A, the remainder of that proposal remains intact. I don't know if there's anybody had any chance to look at that in any particular way, to have any further comment on that. We can defer any further look at this to the extent that we need to, but this is one proposal that's essentially in a final form. We haven't voted on it to make it our final proposal, but this is one that's been out there and discussed before. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this?
Now, I will just say that the daily proposal is what is in the motions that we discussed and that Jeremy reviewed, and it goes beyond what you guys have proposed. I don't know if you want me to quickly walk you through those or just stick with what you got there.
Why don't you go ahead, Colette? Let's go ahead and
Okay.
do that.
So under 502A eligibility, Frank has created 4 or 5 bullet points. First bullet point is candidates must be one of the owners of record of real property in the subdivision. The addition being for a minimum of 3 years prior to the first day of January of the year in which the election is to be held, and eligible to vote under Section 301C unless, for the purposes of duration of ownership, they have served on a committee or an advisory body established by the board for a period of no less than 12 months prior to May 1 of the year in which the election is to be held. So that's item 1 that he added. Let me get to item 2. So then under A2, he has this language, I believe, was in there already. The candidate may not be an incumbent director completing a second consecutive elected full term of office, but that becomes its own bullet. And then number 3 is the candidate may not be a plaintiff or a defendant in a pending action in a Maryland or federal court in which the association is named as the defendant or plaintiff. And Jeremy is cleaning up that language, but that's the concept. And then qualification, the next one, number 4, is the candidate or their spouse by legal marriage, civil union, or any recognized cohabitation arrangement may not have been convicted of a felony within 10 years of May 1 in the year in which the election is to be held. Jeremy does not like the spouse thing. He believes that the members will reject that. So for referendum purposes, he is going to work on the language of this and bifurcate it. So we will be voting on spouse ... and the candidate ... So the same criteria, but applying it to each of them separately. So if the spouse issue does not pass the referendum, we would be hopeful that the candidate portion would. And then the 5th thing, I guess that was it. The other things that we talked about were 502B and C, and I can review those with you when we get to that point in your discussion if you choose.
Could you just repeat the one, either the second or the third one about being a plaintiff? Did that have a, was that of like as of January 1 or as of date of application? Was there a date?
You know what, that was going to be within 10 years of, wait a minute, let me see, that's the, so the felony one?
No, the one about you can't be a
the
plaintiff or a
defendant.
defendant?
No, may not currently be a plaintiff or a defendant. I think it's what the language will be.
Yeah, so I know we're really, Jim, not intending to debate these here, but it just occurred to me. I just want to get this thought out real quick for Colette. That almost seems like a potential catch-22 situation now that I think about it, because if we're going to take the position that you have to meet all eligibility requirements in order to apply for candidacy, and then we're going to say, after you apply for candidacy, if we discover that you do not meet any of the eligibility requirements, you could potentially be made ineligible. Then it seems like it's a potential catch-22 if somebody is, something comes up after they've applied for candidacy, they feel compelled to sue Ocean Pines, and then Ocean Pines says, well, because you sued us, you're no longer eligible to be
Right.
a board member. So it just occurred to me. I just thought of that, just something to think about.
Yeah, that's a good point, Keith. I'm glad you brought that up. That did not come up in our discussion, but I will certainly, I made note of that and I will bring that up in the board discussion if it comes back. Jeremy may catch that himself. We'll see what he comes back with. But thank you, Keith. I appreciate that.
There may be a second problem with that language as well. If I remember what you just read, Colette, it says person who is a plaintiff or defendant in a lawsuit in which the Ocean Pines is a defendant.
Yeah, or plaintiff. So if we're suing somebody, say for, whatever things we could sue them for, usually it would be suing them for CPI violations or not paying their assessments, which would be a disqualifier to begin with. So,
Well,
I'm not sure how this one's gonna go when the board actually discusses it. I think both you and Keith are raising some important points here.
well, the one point that sticks in my mind is in both the FAR lawsuit, but I believe as a general rule in almost any of these lawsuits, you would have a situation where each of the board members individually, you'd be suing Ocean Pines and the board members by name individually. Once that board member is named as a defendant,
Oh, right.
ruled ineligible to run, it seems to me that's not what you want. I may be wrong about that, but that would be
Yeah.
something to flag. The other question I have is, and maybe I missed it, In our draft, we included, I think the language about you can't be a candidate if you are an incumbent director completing second consecutive full term, family relationship, or parentage or sibling. I thought that language was picked up by you, but if I missed it, I apologize. But I didn't hear the one about no member shall be a candidate for election as a director of the association if he or she is an employee of the association. And I didn't hear anything about the corporate entity stuff.
Okay, let me go back and look at that. So owner of record, that's A1. Okay, A2 is incumbent. A3 is plaintiff. And A4 is felony. Yeah, you're right. It's not in these. So, and was that in the original language? Let me take a look. That was
It
502.
in our proposal.
Okay, so I will go back to that. So that's in the document that we have up that we're going to be reviewing today,
Um,
502A.
It's the document that I think Jim referred to as we worked on last meeting.
And
Yeah,
that is the bylaws proposals. It's
Correct.
in that, isn't it?
that's correct.
Yeah,
Uh,
so let me,
So
Josh, if you can go all the way to the back of the document, go all the way back to, hang on a second. I can figure out where I am here. Go back to page 17.
17 of the
of
document that
proposal
we're
document.
reviewing.
Yes. There you go.
right. So what I'm mentioning to Colette is that unless I'm wrong, I don't believe
Got it. That, you're right. That,
Uh,
Steve, that
I-
didn't make it in.
502 4 or 5 was not picked up.
Okay. Oops. Got it. Yes. Whoops. Trying to do this on my iPad. Not easy. So I see it here as 502A3, no member shall be a candidate for election, ... has a familial relationship.
Right. That one
Okay.
I thought was you had referred to maybe in different language.
Yeah, no, I don't think that got picked up. I'm gonna check on that.
Okay.
Jeremy will be sending these documents back for our review before we send them to the board for consideration for a vote in a meeting. So I'll make sure that I bring that up.
So so then it would be 502A 3, 4, and 5 from our proposal. I think that's right.
Yeah, the copy that oh yeah, here's 4 and 5, candidate, an employee, and corporate entity.
Right.
So, okay.
Okay.
And just add in 502A2, which is the 301 section 301C reference, that was sort of the original proposal to eliminate the distinction between when assessment payments would be due. I think that relates back to an earlier case where a candidate filed suit. I wasn't here at the time, but that's my recollection.
Yeah, that was the Brett Hill suit.
And, you know, to me, based upon our discussion several months back, that one was, just sort of, I don't want to say almost a housekeeping proposal that should be added in before we got into all this other stuff.
Right,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, anybody else with some comments?
Just to clarify then, Colette, are you saying we as a committee will also be able to see what Jeremy comes up with his meshing of all of this stuff together before it officially goes to the board then for an official vote, or, and all of that? We as a committee here will also be able to see, so that we could either agree with his recommendations then, or ask questions to make sure that, maybe to see what parts that we recommended are still there, or how things are worded.
Yeah, I think it will be at that point that, your advice would still be welcome as a committee or as individual members, but it may go forth to the board for vote without changes made, but you could still kind of weigh in on the discussion that the board will be having. So I'll have to, I think it sounds like you feel that the best process would be for you guys to weigh in, maybe do a position paper or something to be sent forth for the board discussion if you have points of disagreement.
I think that we should be able to do that if at all possible.
Yeah, and I would not disagree with that, Jim. So I'll make note of that.
Okay, I've one comment, actually two, but one more directly to what we've just discussed. I think that the owner of record should be removed from the bylaws. That was a specific turning point of the opinion in the FAR case. The opinion even recognized that bylaws are the only place that term is used. I've done my own look through the charter, the bylaws, and the at least one set of declarations and restrictions, and I would agree with that, except that I can't, for whatever reason, my software in some cases doesn't do a very good word and phrase search. Owner of record should be removed and replaced by the term member. And then the term member should be defined in a manner that correlates with how it's used, or how the DRs say how one becomes a member. I can't say it much. I have a specific proposal that I would make on the definition of member. But be that as it may, owner of record has no place in the bylaws.
Okay, and are you intending to send your proposal forward for review by the board and Jeremy?
As an individual, I can, yeah.
Okay, so at this point, where it stands based on my discussion with Jeremy and Frank is that Jeremy has his opinion, and that I believe is going to be reflected in the recommendation he gives us as to how to handle that. And so obviously the board will have to decide if they accept his proposal. And, they'll certainly consider other opinions as well. But of course, Jeremy's will weigh heavily because he's our legal counsel and the HOA expert that we rely on. So, and I don't want to say more about that because I feel like I'm treading on the territory of legal advice. And I don't want, it's not my place to be making our legal advice public. So.
Jim, may I ask you a question about your thought on that?
Yeah.
If looking at 502A1, if it said all candidates must be members as listed, you would still incorporate, I'm asking you this, I'm not making a statement. Would you still incorporate the other qualifications in 2, 3, 4, and 5 that are in our proposal? Yeah, 2, 3.
The limitations on being a director or director candidate,
Yes.
I don't have any particular objection to those.
Okay, so it's just the term owner of record is, or
Owner of record is my concern, yeah.
so if
So
you
you're
could,
saying,
if
what
you
Keith,
that inserted the word member or members.
Yeah, I would insert the word member and have a definition of member.
Okay,
Now, we do have a definition of member now, but I would revise that as well.
okay.
Okay.
Everything else would
Yeah.
follow in,
so if you would,
I'd say my concern is member starts with the DRs. And you have to understand what it is where it says you become a member by having equitable title or legal title, and you continue on. You have to have a member definition that matches that. And you also have to understand what is meant by equitable title. I have my own views of that, and I've expressed them only to this committee. I think each of you would have gotten what I received, my views on that over a month ago. But again, it makes no sense to me to leave in the bylaws an owner of record reference after reading through the decision in the FAR case. It just doesn't make any sense. And not further define owner of record. That part of the opinion was expressed criticism of that.
okay. So I believe you sent that position paper to me as well. And, I will take that forth to Jeremy for his consideration.
Okay, the only thing I want to say is that I changed nothing in that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, have we gone, well, on this particular, we're in the section 5, in particular, the candidate and board member parts of that. Do we have any further comments as far as we have gone at this point in time? Okay, rather than try to go back into the status sheet, Colette, if you would continue on with what has taken place with regard to the conversation or meeting with Jeremy. Let's go from there that way.
So I went through all of 502A, right? And the search committee, he had a motion about the search committee that we're pulling because we have to work on the language based on the recommendation that came from this committee about making the search committee a standing committee. And so I'll be working on that. And then there's a motion having to do with the candidate applications, which I am having him change the language to be a candidate registration form. And it, has specific language about submitting the form not later than May 10th. The candidate meets the requirements as of May 10th. And so it's pretty similar to what's in the language now, but just clarifies that it adds must list their full legal name and all supporting documentation requested from the application form, if any.
Okay,
So that,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
so that's it.
Okay. Any comments on the search committee aspect of the proposals?
No.
I have none.
No,
Okay. There are items in the search committee bylaws as they stand now that I think need to be need to be considered, and we haven't really gotten into it at the committee level. There's no reason for the search committee to handle applications. They ought to go straight to the secretary. And that also brings into question this May 10th submittal date, and as of May 15th, review of qualifications, review of eligibility to be a candidate. Are those good dates? For example, May 10th to the secretary and May 15th for the secretary to start, not necessarily to start, but the cutoff date for eligibility considerations. Leaving some of that as is I think unproductive. In particular, the search committee handling the applications. There's no reason for that. We even had an episode some time ago, in the past 10 years or so, since the search committee was created. It was questionable as to whether the applications ever went to the search committee anyway. Now, that's not necessarily a verified story, but it's supposedly that happened, that the applications were never handled by the search committee. And we wound up putting in there, I think you'll find in M09 a provision that there'll be a search committee box maintained in the association offices. And I think it's been in the executive secretary's office, where they would be deposited and then turned over to the search committee. There's no reason. The search committee's purpose is to solicit members, not to gather up applications. And they shouldn't be, this two or more applicants and vacancies. That's an unnecessary thing. They should be going after as many people as they can get to become an applicant. Broadly disseminate the opportunity, if you will, of being a candidate. And again, the May 10th, May 15th, why not May 1st and May 1st? What is it about May 15th? I think at one time, Steve, you may have made reference to, well, that's goes back to where we did, you or Keith or both, it goes back to when maintaining records was mostly by hand, as opposed today you can be looking things up, assessment records in particular, immediately, probably by way of electronic records. But anyway, there are things in there that I think need to be reconsidered. Let's put it that way. Whatever comes back from Tucker, we can look at it then. That's all. It's fine with me.
Well, I think maybe Keith raised the issue of dates as it relates to picking up data online as opposed to doing sort of a old-fashioned, eyeball search, flipping through the files and all that. My concern about the dates was just, as I recall, when it came up, there was a gap between the time before the secretary certified or sent to the elections committee the list of eligible candidates. And, I thought the benefit of that was to allow the secretary to engage in some informal discussions with the candidate who might have a problem with their application. But both Colette and Laura, I thought, made good points that, the burden should be on the candidate to get it right in the first place. We shouldn't sort of, create this or allow for this time to take place where something could take, which may not be what we wanted for it to be used. And I was fine with that. So I just said, we'll move back to the dates that work for everybody. That was as far as I went.
Okay. I'm just recalling some discussion about the length of time, the waiting till May 15th, let's put it that way. The time between May 15th and the June 1st date, that length of time, I don't have any problem with that. 2 weeks for the secretary to be able to resolve any problems. I refer to legal counsel or whatever has to be done. I don't have any problem with that kind of length of time. Okay, anything further on that?
No.
All right, Colette, if you continue on from there, if we haven't got to the end of the.
Yeah, let me
me.
see. I'm not sure. I think we did get to the end. Oh, your draft comments, which is, this was all on Article 5. That was, you had made the comment about if at any time during the time frame of the election process, the secretary is informed or becomes aware of a question of a particular candidate's eligibility. That was under D of, where is this? 502D. And so Jeremy is going to work on, I think in concept, we agreed with your recommendations, and Jeremy was going to work on the language for that. And then the other thing he was going to work on is the issue of the secretary resigning if the secretary becomes a candidate. So that's section D is what Jeremy's going to come back to us with language on, but there was no disagreement with the concepts within that section.
Yeah, I think the only, not sure this is the exact point, but my recollection is in our discussion, the, for lack of a better term, daily proposal had the secretary taking all this action on them, on him or herself. The
Yeah,
board was
and
not,
that was, I'll tell you
taking-
that both Jeremy and Frank felt that that was appropriate, because if it becomes a board action, then it could be easily, there's a slippery slope to make it become political.
right, and I understand that, and in part, I would assume that comes up if you had, out of a 7-member board, if you had, let's say, 3 members of the board, including the secretary running for re-election at that time, they all had to recuse themselves or be disqualified for whatever reason, you'd have, 4 members voting, and that may not be what is desirable. The only thing I would say, I mean, we'll see what he comes up with. The only thing I would say was, it always struck me that, for lack of a better term, most of what the secretary had to do in this process was, you can call it ministerial, you can call it administrative, whatever you want. But when it came to the discussion and the action of removing from the ballot an otherwise, in theory, qualified candidate, or where the qualifications come into question, that is something that should not have been left to just one person. It should have been, it's something that should be decided by the board. That's why we put that in there.
That is, okay, and that is what was decided by the board. That was not, the candidate eligibility issue is the authority of the secretary. What to do about it is the authority of the board.
If there's a question involved, yes, I would agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of where it stands at this point.
Okay.
I want to make sure.
I think the better job that we can do to clarify what those eligibility, what the eligibility criteria is, so it's clear, that we'll avoid some of these problems in the future. I think that's one of the reasons that, we had this struggle this last time, is because there were too many questions. So I think the work that we're doing here will help mitigate that in the future.
Okay, do I understand correctly that the direction, if I can put it that way, is that the secretary determines the eligibility, but if there's an ineligibility decision have to be made, a challenge to that in some manner, it will be made by the board. Is that, do I understand that?
Yes.
Okay,
It would be made by the board members that aren't running for reelection.
That would be the intent.
Yes, that was my question.
Yeah,
I don't, I don't personally like this, the board involved in any kind of decision like that, but, you know,
But who would?
perhaps,
make
what
that
perhaps
decision?
should be done is there should be some other committee of some kind, which could include the secretary, for example, that would have to make that kind of a decision. I sometimes look, for example, at Chop Tank Electric's bylaws, simply because it's a non-stock corporation. I understand it's completely different from Ocean Pines, but they have credentials and elections committees that is fully vested with powers within the election process. And I don't like to see a board of directors, in this case, vested with the authority to make some kind of decision affecting an election like that. You know, you mentioned slippery slope, and that's a slippery slope.
I think the way I'm interpreting what you're saying, Jim, is that the reason you don't like the board having the final say in that is that we don't know those who are voting, if they haven't had to recuse themselves from voting, are they actually biased or non-biased? We're looking for a neutral party to actually confirm and say this person ended up becoming ineligible for whatever reason, and it's now been confirmed by a group, a subcommittee that takes on that, not these other board members who may or may not be familiar with the candidate and may not want that candidate to move forward.
Well, I'm not so much
as a possibility, you know what I mean? Like,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
are you, so I guess what I'm saying then is I would agree that it might be better to have a neutral, I don't know exactly the word I'm looking for, committee that would help make those decisions that they're not running, they aren't potential board directors, they, you know, to who might skew, they have no vested, they have no reason to show that they might be biased in who they all agree is ineligible or whatnot. But I do agree that it really should not be one person's responsibility to do that. I do feel there needs to be, however it's done, like a party of three, you know, at least, to verify that everybody's in agreement. This is what happened. This is why that person's ineligible.
Okay, I'm not at this point in time, and maybe never, advocating some major change in the bylaws regarding what I mentioned, an independent committee. I'm not in any manner proposing that. I'm just showing it or using it as an illustration.
Okay.
What I do support is retaining the secretary as the person making the decisions. You then, if there is a question about what that individual is doing, how they're making their decision, and motives, sound basis for the decision, it's focused on one person. It's not spread across a group of persons where you may have a mixture of agendas, loyalties, associations, whatever, that are seen or not seen. I think it's much more controlled if you're focusing on that one individual and that one individual's responsibility. We do have that secretary in perhaps a lesser degree of responsibility, but not really when it comes to referendums. The bylaws call for the secretary to make the decision on whether or not a referendum proposal coming up from the membership is in fact a valid proposal. Now, there may have been, in this past go around a couple of years ago now, maybe some weaknesses in how that was done, but it's not unusual, I don't want to say not unusual. We do have the secretary invested with some very serious authority individually elsewhere in the bylaws. So it's not having the secretary having the elections responsibility given to the secretary is not an outlier. That's what I'm saying. And again, I'm more concerned about it being focused on an individual's decisions. Anyway, again, I don't want to get us off on a tangent here.
Well, I just think if we really do the homework up front, the chances of this ever reoccurring should be almost zero.
Correct.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, I think that's the whole point of the work we're trying to do here is there was too much gray area. There was too much fuzziness that the previous secretary had to deal with in making the decision.
Yeah.
And we know that now because we reviewed the bylaws, we reviewed the candidate form, and we can see how easily it would have been to have multiple paths to make a decision. So to the extent that we can make it as clear as possible with these new updates about what the eligibility requirements are, to the extent that we could make them black or white, yes or no, then the burden of a decision, anything more than essentially a checklist, will be removed, and it should be much more reasonable for the secretary to do it, I think.
Okay. Colette, do we have more to go on this part of on the Tucker, Daly, and yourself meeting? Or have we reached the end of that? She may be on mute.
I think she said we've reached the end. I was
Yeah, we
reading.
have reached the end. Sorry, I was on mute.
All right. Well,
My words often fall on deaf ears, sometimes through my own fault.
all right. Let me reorganize my stack of papers here.
Well, as somebody who reads lips a lot, it comes in handy sometimes during a muted session, right? Except for when we all have to wear our face masks, then I can't read lips, so then I'm at a disadvantage.
All right, the next item in our proposals would be the maximum number of votes. And in the proposals, that's pages 3 and 4. Just a brief summary. This goes back to the bylaws referendum on the capital expenditures. The opinion given regarding the bylaws provision regarding the maximum number of votes, this number of signatures required being 10% of the maximum number of votes that could be cast. The opinion that the association followed was that the maximum number of votes to be cast provision should be read to mean that maximum number of votes that could be cast, or in other words, eligible to be cast on the day that the proposal was, the referendum proposal was submitted. The problem with that is that would mean that the prior bylaws up until 2008 were modified in 2008, and there's no evidence to indicate that was an intentional modification. The prior to 2008 bylaws, it was clear that it would be 10% of the total available votes throughout the association, without regard to eligibility to vote on the day that the referendum proposal was submitted. And that's, there's in the proposal section, pages 3 and 4, that's gone into and in some detail. And again, I'm the one who has brought forth this proposal, and I think it's the right way to go. Do we have any comments, discussion on that? I can elaborate further if we need to. No, frankly, it is reversing the attorney's opinion. I won't put it any other way. I think there's a basis for it. Among other things, the bylaws amendments affect everybody, all association members, regardless of whether they're eligible at any given time or not. You're across the board. All membership of the association is affected by the bylaws. It isn't any number of people eligible on any given day. And you also get into a shopping forum situation. If you want to have a better chance at your petition being having enough signatures, you do it as close to May 1st as you can, after May 1st, because that'll be the lowest number of eligible votes.
So Jim, I will just say that I missed this one. We did discuss this. And we agreed with you, basically, that this should be the total number of possible votes, not who's eligible on any given day. So Jeremy is going to work on a motion regarding that.
Okay, well, that's fine with me.
So just so I'm clear, on the second page of this proposal, which I guess on mine is page 4, it says proposed revisions, revise sections 407C2 and C3. That would be, those two provisions would be 10% of the maximum votes that could be cast of eligible voters. Is that right? Because it references 301A.
308
correctly?
The reference to 301A is to be a reference. 301A is intended to mean all of the votes within the association.
Oh, because pay their assessments on time.
No, all of the votes that could be cast theoretically.
Okay, all right. I was referencing the wrong thing then. Okay.
Yeah, 301A says a member shall be entitled to 1 vote for each numbered residential lot, condominium lot, so forth.
Right.
That may or may not be kind of wording that's the best, but I don't know that it needs to be revised. It's intended, that reference to 301A is intended to be referring to all of the votes in the association without regard to eligibility.
I got you. Right. I get that now. Okay. That was the only question I had. I'm fine with it.
Okay. Well, I guess Colette's indicated that Jeremy's.
Yeah, Jeremy's fine with that too.
All right, let's move along here. Next one is the proposal for notice in meetings. This is kind of a cleanup provision. A key part of it on page 5 is add a new 404C to read, and it says a single notice addressed to indicate it's all members in common of the subject property shall be sent to the address designated above. The bylaws already, I'm sorry, not the bylaws. The charter already says that we only send out a single notice where a property is owned by multiple persons of different addresses. It doesn't say it that way, but that's what is intended. We're not going to send out if you have 5 different owners living at 5 different addresses, we're not going to send out 5 notices of member meetings. The charter already says that. The bylaws do not now say that. And the additional 404C, which is not, there's not a C now, is intended to incorporate in the bylaws that charter provision, to incorporate in the notice provisions of the bylaws that information or that charter provision. Now up above it, 404B has been changed. I believe this was a recommendation from Keith regarding the responsibility for maintaining address information. So the basic change suggested here again is to incorporate in the notice provisions of the bylaws a provision that was previously inserted into the charter when the charter was updated in 2011, 12, 13 timeframe. Well, I guess it was actually 2013 and 14. Any questions or comments on that? All right, Colette, is this one in any manner come to the notice of Jeremy?
No, we'll have to send this one forward. So I can send it forward if you like, based on this discussion. Just take it out of, cut and paste out of this document.
Yeah, I don't see a reason why not.
Okay.
Anybody have any comments on it? This is one we've already discussed. It was put in the format that you see there as a how to phrase it, as a way of potentially sending it to the board as what you see here. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. No, I'll send it to Jeremy and the board.
Okay. Let me make some notes here. I wind up having to look at the video to do the minutes anyway. All right. Keith, we're up to page 6, which is the referendum issues. Would you want to take it from there, please? I didn't, this is the one, our proposal on changing how we do referendums.
So the original wording in the bylaws did not have any kind of requirement for minimum participation in a referendum vote in order for it to be considered passed. In other words, we put a requirement that you need 10% of voters in order to do the petition to get a referendum. But then when we send out the referendum based on that petition, there's no minimum participation requirement of people to vote on it in order for it to pass. So let's say you get 2,000 people to sign a petition, and then the referendum goes out for a vote and 10 people vote on it. Well, according to the original language, it was by a simple majority that the vote was passed. So if only 10 people in the membership voted on it and 6 of them said yes, the issue passed. So I did some research, and basically what the research showed was in most cases, referendums are bundled with regular election cycles. And regular election cycles have higher voter turnout. So in that case, they didn't put a minimum participation requirement on it because they knew they were going to get a reasonable participation rate because it was an election cycle. But because Ocean Pines allows standalone referendums that are not bundled with an election cycle, then potentially you have a situation where you're sending out a referendum for vote. A very, very small number of members could vote on it and affect big changes that impact all membership. So the recommendation was to put some sort of minimum vote eligibility on it. So if you scroll down to the red language, if you see it there, Most of the places that I looked up that did put a minimum participatory vote on it, it typically was equal to the vote percentage that they typically got in a regular election. So for us, it would be board of directors elections. And for us, we typically get about 40% participation rates in our board of directors elections. So my recommendation, and I don't know if it's the right number, but it's just what seemed to match what other people did, was that any proposal presented in a standalone referendum must receive a minimum of total votes cast for or against equal in number to 40% of the total votes that can be cast.
Okay, I should have, as an introductory comment, this is again one of the bylaws issues, considerations that came to us from the bylaws work group. As is the case with each of the ones that we've discussed so far, and we'll be continuing with as we go through this. So the bylaws work group did raise the question of should we not have some form of minimum participation before in order for a referendum question to pass. This is not something that we a topic to discuss, to consider, that we ourselves brought up. This is one that came to us, and this is our response to it. Our proposal, as Keith has gone through and his brief review of how we got to that. So, do we have any further comments on that?
Can I ask two questions? One is there any place where the term standalone resolution is defined?
I don't think so.
So wouldn't we want any resolution to be approved by 40% of the voters?
Well, theoretically, yes, but the referendums that are bundled with our board of directors elections are exposed to 40% because that's typically what we get in Ocean Pines. That's our participation rate is 40%. So you could say that, I guess you could say that, and it wouldn't, it's, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I guess it would be resolved either way, right? So I don't think there's anything wrong with that suggestion.
Okay. And my second question, and I admittedly am treading in unusual territory for me because this is a grammatical question. Wouldn't we want the term to be any proposal presented in the standalone referendum or just referendum must receive a minimum of total votes cast for and against, as opposed to for or against?
Oh yeah, that I agree with that.
Because or is a disjunctive. You want it to be conjunctive.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you on that. Good catch. So then what we're saying is recommend strike the word standalone and change or to and.
Yeah, I definitely
I agree with that.
And I just don't know why you would want any resolution to be considered differently than any other resolution. That's why I said no reason to have standalone in there, but there may be a reason that I'm not aware of.
Well,
yeah, no, I agree with that. The only thing I'll say is, I guess when they go to count so if a referendum is bundled with a board of directors vote, what that means is they would have to specifically count the number of people who voted on the referendum issue to make sure it met that criteria, because we wouldn't have the same criteria for the board of directors themselves. So it'd be one ballot with multiple issues on it, and we'd be treating some of the issues on the ballot differently than other issues on the ballot.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, it would have to be anything other than the election of officers.
Right.
Every other thing in the ballot would have to meet that 40% threshold.
Yes, I don't know if that's a level of complication that is okay, or if that is, if it's unnecessary. I don't know. I think that's the only thing I can think of is if we remove that word standalone.
Well, I mean, if you look at any other election, if there's 500 people vote in the election for president, and then you go to a vote for town council, you don't get 500. You get fewer than that number. In other words, as you go down the ballot, fewer people are voting on for each individual issue. I get that. On the other hand, I don't know why you would treat a resolution that's brought up absent a board of directors election differently than you treat a resolution that comes up with a board of directors election. So that's the point I was trying to get at. It seems to me that if our argument is that referendums are of sufficient importance that we have to have a minimum number of voters participating, it really doesn't make a difference when the referendum comes up.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And if they're counting the votes electronically, they know the total number cast for any particular item on that ballot.
That's true. Yeah, that's
so
true.
It's right there, and that's all you care about, the total votes. You don't care whether it's for or against, just total.
Right.
Okay, the total votes that can be cast, that's the total ballots that have been sent out, correct? Not the number of ballots that have been returned, not the number of ballots that have been returned.
Well, I took that language from that other section that we just discussed, where it was meant to be the total of properties eligible to cast a vote in that election at that time.
And we're saying 40% of that group must vote for the referendum, either for or against.
Right, and that would equal what Jim is saying. It would be the same as the number of ballots we sent out, because we're only going to send out ballots to the properties eligible to vote at that time.
Right.
Oh, but the discussion on the maximum number of votes, the intended revision would make the maximum number of votes be the total votes within the association without regard to eligibility. I'm not sure that that's what you want here.
No, that's not what we want here, because the 40% participation rate that we get for the board of directors is relative to the number of ballots we send out.
Okay, it should be.
I don't know what kind of wording that would work here.
Well, it'd be total number of eligible votes, or total number of ballots sent out. I don't know that kind of word would be used. Here you're talking. What you're talking about is 40% of the ballots that went out.
Right.
Without suggesting that that's the language.
So
it's not the same thing as the maximum number of votes in a referendum. It's not the referendum, but the signature of a petition for a referendum was what we were talking about there. The 10% of number of signatures is 10% of every vote that exists in the association without regard to eligibility. That's without regard is parenthetical. It's 10% of the ballots, 10% of the votes within the association. Here you're talking about 40% of the ballots that have been sent out, again, without suggesting that that's the language.
Which would be 40% of the total votes
returned
that either have been cast or returned.
No, not returned.
No, you want
have been cast.
No, if we mail out if we mail out 8,000 ballots, we don't get 8,000 ballots back. Not everybody votes.
Right.
So,
you need
so it's 40% of the
back.
ballots we mailed out, right?
Yeah, it should be 40% of the ballots that were mailed out have to cast for or against. And
Is
that
that the wording?
prevents somebody from trying to send something out during an election as opposed to a standalone, if they're trying to get it through.
So equal in number to 40% of the total ballots mailed?
Yeah,
Well, no, at some point, they may not be mailed. They may be done electronically.
Well, so 40% of the total ballots?
eligible ballots.
Total votes eligible to be cast. That would be my suggestion.
Total votes eligible to be cast.
Right,
Yeah.
that works. And
Total votes eligible to be cast. So we delete the word standalone. We change or to and then we change the end of the sentence to say 40% of the total votes eligible to be cast.
Mhm.
Okay. I agree with that.
I'm not sure if we've lost Colette. She's not showing.
I see her,
There.
she's listed.
No, she's there.
She's there.
Yeah,
She's there.
I'm getting emails, questions I have to answer, so I'm trying to do two things at once. So what I need you to
Multitask.
do, I kind of listened to your discussion with one ear, but I will need you to tell me what language you decided upon. I
That's
think
what
I
hap-
understand the concept that there are two concepts here. One is number of eligible votes, which which is the same as the number of ballots sent out versus the number of possible votes based on the
Right.
number of properties in the association.
Do you have the
So-
wording in front of you there?
This is page 6 of the proposals.
Yeah, let me get back into that document. So page 6.
Yes. Go down to where it says proposed.
Yeah. So
Proposed
what did
revision.
you come up with then? It's a total number equal in the number to 40% of what?
So I'll read the whole thing to you.
Okay,
We made a couple changes. Any proposal presented in a referendum must receive a minimum of total votes cast for and against equal in number to 40% of the total votes eligible to be cast.
okay, got it. So I can send that forward to the board and Jeremy then.
Yes.
Okay, any comments before we leave that? Okay. Next up is the two pages, not proposals, but two pages related to the search committee. We've already gone through that. I think we can bypass that.
Okay.
The next item would be page 8. This is informal action by the board of directors. Again, this is one that I have some interest in, I guess. The background is to make sure it's clear in the bylaws that it's a unanimous action by the board of directors. At one time, there appeared to have been some thinking that if there was an action taken without a meeting, the agreement to take action had to be unanimous, but the actual action vote itself did not have to be unanimous. I think that's no longer a serious consideration, but it was proposed, or it is proposed, to revise the bylaws section 5.10 as indicated at the bottom of the page 8. And basically that just refers back to the code. The code provision is copied up in the middle of page 8. That's the 2-408 action by directors. In there, it should be reasonably clear that it's a unanimous consent to the action that must be it must be a unanimous consent to the action, not by whatever majority the type of action requires by the bylaws, super majority or simple majority, that kind of thing. The only other addition is that it calls for any such informal action, or in other words, action without a committee, to be reported at the next regular meeting and included with the minutes of the meeting. And that is already being done. That's just continue making a bylaws provision and continuing to have it documented in that manner. Any comments on that?
I think that one's pretty straightforward.
Again, it's an attempt, hopefully, to clear up and avoid any future misinterpretation of what the code provisions require regarding informal action, and the reference to the code as opposed to repeating the code in some manner avoids misinterpretations, and it also allows for any changes in the code provision to be made without affecting what the provision is in the bylaws. Okay, any further discussion or comment of that one?
Do you think, so I'm reading the language of the code. And as I recall the discussion that we had, the debate was, which is the unanimous consent? The agreement to address the issue, or the agreement that, or what's unanimous is that we agree on the issue, right? Do you think that language as provided there in the code makes that clear? Because it says, without a meeting, if a unanimous consent, which sets forth the action, is given in writing by each member entitled to vote on the matter and filed in paper or electronic form. So I don't know. Is that really clear?
Yeah, it just refers to a unanimous consent which sets forth the action. You know, you've got to unanimously consent to the action. But that's, you know, if
So
somebody,
Jim, may I
yeah.
interject here? I think if we say, take the language from the Maryland Code, where it says informal action, any action required or permitted to be taken by motion at a meeting of a board, makes it clear that it's the motion that is to be voted upon, not the voting upon the motion, that has to be unanimous. So the votes on the motion need to be unanimous. That's what you're wanting to have this mean, right?
Okay, after taken, it would be taken by motion by the board
Yeah.
of directors. Okay,
So you like that?
yeah, it's okay with me.
No,
I think that's more clear.
no.
No?
Okay. You got a
Okay.
dissenting opinion.
As I read what is in the code specifically talks about informal action by the directors, which as I read it, is when it's informal, there's no physical meeting taking place.
That's
So
right.
there has to be unanimous agreement to meet informally. But the vote on the motion, the substantive motion, whatever that substantive motion is, stays the same. It's a majority vote. Doesn't say it has to be a unanimous vote. Only the informal meeting itself, for whatever reason, the board, there's a desire to meet informally. Maybe there's an emergency, maybe there's weather, maybe there's something, whatever the reason, maybe there's a coronavirus, who knows? They meet informally. They're not meeting physically or in their regularly scheduled meeting. That's done unanimously. All the members have to agree to do that. But none of the members give up their right to oppose the substantive motion.
Well, Steve, have you kind of followed how the board has been doing this?
No, I'm referring
Yeah,
only
let me,
in the
yeah, but
code.
let me tell you how the board has interpreted this, and we've been on the other side of Jim's position on this. Our position had been that the informal action is the voting on a motion that otherwise would need to be voted on in a meeting. And so we would have to agree unanimously to vote by email, but we wouldn't have to agree unanimously on the motion itself.
I think that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so that's how we have done it in the past. That's not what Jim is proposing. And personally, you know, I think there's only one since I've been on the board in which we have had a motion that we've taken by email in which we did not all vote in favor of the motion. And it was the first meeting that Tom Janasek attended. And when he voted no by email, and then it was announced in the subsequent meeting, he was not happy about the fact that there had not been a public discussion of this motion. He wanted to be able to discuss his position on the motion publicly. And so he didn't like that it had been voted for by email, but he didn't say so. He agreed to vote by email. And so, you know, I think his point was well taken, that if there is not unanimous agreement on the motion, the public deserves to hear the discussion of the members, pro and con to the motion. And so it should be held in public meeting, because otherwise that discussion is lost to the members. And so that makes me agree with, I think that's what Jim is arguing, that the motion itself everybody has to be prepared to vote in favor of the motion if they are going to consent to vote on it by email. If they are not prepared to vote in favor of the motion, they should not agree to the email vote, and then it will be put on either a special meeting agenda if it's a time urgent matter, or it would wait until the next regular meeting.
Well, that that all may be well and good. My point is only that Jim's proposal is not consistent with at least what I read as being in the Maryland Code. Now, I don't know what occurred with the proposal that you're referring to, or what Mr. Janasek's. I mean, our board meetings are viewable online. You could always file, I believe I'm correct, although it's been a long time since I looked at Robert's Rules of Order. You could always file a motion to reconsider a particular vote at a later date. I don't know that anybody's rights would be preempted. I would assume that the reason why there's a motion that A, asks for an informal action, and B, a unanimous vote, is because it is so important to get it done.
Right.
Okay.
And Steve, to your point about the motion to reconsider, that can only be made if the motion has not been acted upon. So if we email vote on something and then what we voted on is acted upon, by the time we get to the next meeting, we can't do a motion to reconsider.
Well, okay, I'll defer to you. As I said, it's been a long time since I looked at Robert's rules. But my point is simply that to do, I think, and if I'm wrong, that's fine, but what Jim is suggesting is not consistent with the provision that's in the Maryland Code now. In that it does not, it requires someone to vote, it requires the board to vote unanimously, both on the meeting, on the informal meeting, and also to vote unanimously on the subject matter of that meeting.
Okay,
Which, to me,
Can
so
I
I
ask,
think where we are, for you, go ahead.
can I ask, so I need some legal definition here, because I guess this is where I'm off track. It says unanimous consent, which sets forth the action. What does that mean, which sets forth?
That's a good question.
It says may be taken without a meeting if a unanimous consent, quote, which sets forth, unquote, the action is blah, blah, blah. So what does that mean, which sets forth?
I assume it's the subject matter.
Well, see, that is the subject of debate. That's why we're having this debate, is because some people say what that means is an agreement to have the vote, and other people say what that means is the vote itself. That's the whole problem.
Yeah, right. I understand what you're saying. I don't think that's the way it's, well, okay, look, let me backtrack one step. It is distinctly possible that within the code, there is sufficient legislative history to tell you exactly what they're trying to get at, which we don't have in front of us. But the way I'm reading that is just to say that you can, if there's a unanimous vote of the board to meet without a physical meeting on the subject matter, that is, sets forth the action. In other words, someone's got to say, you know, it's important that we meet now to repeal Title 5B, or Section 5B of the bylaws. And the board agrees to do it. I'm not saying they would do it. I'm just saying that, use that as an example. That's everybody votes to meet without a physical meeting, take informal action.
Yeah, and Steve,
And
how
then you
we've handled
then
this,
debate the
these have
process.
not been meetings. When we don't have an email meeting, when this happens, we just vote on a motion by email. So it's not, you know, there's no meeting taking place. If we need a special urgent meeting, we call a special meeting and we have it, you know, precipitously. So, you know, I think because this controversy is here, that we're not agreeing on what this Comar language means. What the board is asking you guys to do is give us your best advice on what we should put in our bylaws on this topic, regardless of any confusion about what Comar means. And of course, it will then go to council, and council may have a brief on the legislative findings surrounding this particular language or a legal finding surrounding this particular language in Comar.
I mean, the bottom line out of, I think, almost all of these different state statutes, whether it be homeowners associations or landlord-tenant agreements or whatever, is that the parties get an opportunity for notice and comment. In which case, I mean, you can call it an emergency meeting, however the board currently does it. I have no problem with if the board were to say, we're going to meet in 24 hours at this location, at this time, to discuss this provision, you know, and here's whether it's exact language or a synopsis or something. As long as everybody gets notice, then I think you've met the basic requirement. Now, council may require more than that, but you want at least an opportunity for notice and comment. Everybody knows there's a meeting coming up. You get there, you can comment. That would be the base requirement you would need. Maybe you don't need to worry whether you call it an informal meeting. The board can call an emergency meeting under whatever provisions they currently have. Maybe it's up to the president. Maybe it's up to,
Well, it's either the president or two
like
directors can call an emergency meeting, or the president alone can. But
Well,
this interpretation makes it sound like no that anytime we vote on any motion, it needs to be in either an electronic meeting, Teams meeting, or physical meeting to which the public has been given notice.
Right. To me, that's the basic requirement is you have to give you have to give notice and you have to give people an opportunity to comment or participate or whatever term you want to use.
Mhm.
That seems to be the basic tenet, the bedrock of all of these statutes. So you may not want to have to call it informal meeting. Just ensure that in the in addition to regularly scheduled meetings, any meeting of the Ocean Pines Board, notice is provided as to date, time, and location, and the public is free to come and comment as it sees fit, or the voter, however you want, the membership is free to comment as it sees fit.
Well, but we're not talking about meetings here. The statute specifically says may be taken without a meeting. That's what we're talking about here, without a meeting. Now, I can't reconcile the proposed wording for 510 with Steve's understanding of the statute, the code provision, because the proposed provision merely refers back to the statute. It doesn't add anything or take anything away from the words of the statute. Now, my personal understanding of what it says in the statute is that the consent to take the action has to be unanimous. Now, I've said publicly before, so I'll say it publicly again. I don't care if the association wants to do a two-step process, vote unanimously to take action and then take action. Okay, I've publicly said I don't think a two-step is what's called for there. You state what you're going to take action, and you got to have unanimous consent to do it. That's the way I read that. Let's put it that way. But I can't, I can't go back and if there is doubt about what the statute says, then we just as well leave the bylaws provision the way it's written.
I think the simple fact that we've been talking about this now for 15 minutes tells me lawyers need to get involved because I have reread this opening paragraph several times. And I think if there's going to be something in the bylaws, it should be there. If this were crystal clear to me, then the only thing we'd put in the bylaws would be a reference to it. But it's not crystal clear to me, and I'm going to have to assume that because we're having this debate, it's not crystal clear to other people. So it seems like we need a formal input here, maybe from council, to say, which sets forth, because what Jim is saying is unanimous consent to agree to the action, which makes sense, but that's not what it says. It says unanimous consent, which sets forth the action. So if council says, well, that's what it means, then it seems like we would put wording in the bylaws to clarify that's what that means. So it seems to me like we need some help here. That's my 2 cents.
It's so simple. If the meeting is so important that you have to do it right away. If the board can't agree 100%, then it should be open for debate for the owners or the members, whichever we want to use. But I agree with you, Keith. Let the lawyers take a look at it and tell us the best way to fix it, because that would mean that they can take anything they want, and as long as the majority rules, they don't need a meeting to pass it.
Well, yeah, and so then you get these accusations of the board taking actions out of the public eye via email or maybe a phone call, whatever, And then you go down that a whole ugly road. So I think we need some clarity here. That's just my opinion.
So what do you want me to do? Do you want me to take it to
Take it to
Jeremy
the-
and let him be the final arbiter?
Yes. I would say,
Colette, the only reason this is before us is in the work group, bylaws work group, of which I was one of the 4 members, of course. I brought it up. It's an item that needed some clarification. I'm perfectly willing to withdraw it. I'm serious when I
Well,
say
I
that.
guess what I'm hearing your committee say is that you, as a committee, are of mixed mind on what this means, and that you don't have a unanimous or consensus recommendation to give to the board. My personal, the board has debated this also, kind of in response to what you have brought up repeatedly, Jim, and that this debate is out there. I think, what Bob said is valid, that if we're taking action by email, voting on motions by email that we don't agree to unanimously, an important step in the process is being left out. And that is the member input. So.
Yeah. I think that's true, but Colette, by your description, board doesn't really make use of this provision anyway, because if it's an emergency meeting, they send out notice and everybody's put on notice that this is what's coming up.
Well, we do
So
use this
in which case,
provision.
I would say maybe it's not even required to be there.
Well, Steve, we do use this, and mainly we use it for spending requests. So if there is a spending request that we have to vote on in a meeting, but John needs our answer before we can pull a meeting off, then we do it by email. And all but one time since I've been on the board, we have agreed unanimously on a spending request. There was a spending request that came up. I don't remember what the item was that Janicek did not agree with, and he voted no, and that gave us all pause that, he should have had the opportunity to debate with, in public, and maybe the membership should have had the opportunity to weigh in. But theoretically, we could take any motion that has some urgency to it and vote by email, but we don't. In the years that I've been on the board, 4+ years I've been on the board, it's never happened. Only spending requests.
Well, then maybe just limit it to spending. I mean, let council decide what to do, but if and I have no reason to doubt your representation. All I'm saying is if all it is we're talking about individual spending requests, and you could maybe even narrow it somewhat finer than that, council can draft something to address that question. But if you're talking about major policy questions, then, then I think you do have to at least make sure that there's notice and opportunity for comment. But that's.
Yeah.
But that's what this actually does. It forces it. Either it's 100% or it doesn't it's not done by phone. It's done by a special meeting. So I think the majority of our committee agrees that it should go to the attorney for review.
Yeah, I will just share with you that I am aware of an HOA that's in a different county than Worcester County, where the board rarely meets in person, and they vote almost exclusively by email, and it's not unanimous consent, and they use this provision in the code to justify it, and the membership is livid, and the board insists they're doing nothing wrong. So I don't want to see us get into that situation.
Yeah, we definitely don't want that.
Right.
Is it, and just because I consider myself still fairly new and I don't have everything memorized, is it documented that the board is allowed to conduct any voting by email somewhere?
This is
Well,
the
there's
language.
wording. There's
that's
wording in
used.
current bylaws
Okay.
that attempts to borrow wording from this state statute
Okay.
that, to Jim's point, kind of either continues the confusion or confuses it even more, but in either case has been interpreted as allowing it, either intentionally or unintentionally. So it's addressing that wording that we're talking about now.
Okay, Laura, the code provision, and I'm going to skip parts of it,
Okay.
says any action required or permitted to be taken at a meeting of the board of directors may be taken without a meeting. And then it goes on with regard to the unanimous consent. So any action that can be taken by the board without a meeting, or at a meeting, I'm sorry, can be taken without a meeting. There's no restriction on it.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that would include motions, spending requests, committee appointments. You know, that's basically what we do other than discussion topics. But action, you know, things that are going to, discussion topics are not really actions, but these others are actions.
Well,
I'm not a fan personally of email voting because I think of the lack of transparency, or it leaves room for a lack of transparency to occur. So not totally a fan of that. Whether or not it actually occurs, that's, you know, with parameters and all of that, I can get behind. But in theory, personally, I prefer more formal settings. You know, it's labeled as a meeting or a special meeting, and you've given notice and all of that. That's just my personal experience.
Yeah, and Laura, that is why we have confined it to spending requests, and we have always done it on the assumption that when somebody votes to hold the vote by email, that means they are going to vote affirmative on the motion. Janicek, being a new director, was not aware of that being our practice. And so that was kind of a curveball for us, and it was a curveball for him.
Oh.
And but what happens then after the vote by email is the minutes of the next meeting report. Then the secretary reports that there was an email vote and what it was on. And I believe the attachments that there, the spending request documents are attached in the material. So the transparency is there.
So you're aware before you send out this email asking for unanimous vote to have an informal vote. You know what that topic is then, is what you're saying?
Yeah, we'll say, you know, you will get an email that John has a spending request for a piece of equipment that he needs right away. And, you know, these are the 3 bids he's already got, but he needs this equipment because it's a vital piece and the other piece is broken. So we need to get this done. So we know what the topic is. We know what the cost is going to be. We know that he's done his 3 bids, and so we take the vote. And
so
usually,
that's where it's confusing to me. And how is it explained then? Why was one board director not aware that if they didn't agree, if they agreed to the informal meeting, that meant they were also technically was expected to be also in agreement for that request?
No, you're misunderstanding. There's not the expectation. It's not an explicit expectation that if you agree to the email vote, you're agreeing to the motion. The kind of implicit expectation is that if you disagree with the motion, you're going to want to debate it. So say no to the email vote, and then we won't have it. And Janicek was not aware of that. That's the convention that we had followed.
Yeah, the real problem there is it becomes a perception that somebody was trying to hide something.
Right.
Yeah, and
because it's not clear.
Yeah, and that's
So
why. It
Does this-
disturbed me when this happened, that I felt that, okay, this is not transparent because Janus's objection is not able to be made public
Right.
before the vote occurs. And I was uncomfortable with that. And so we went ahead with the vote. We did the informal action. We discussed it as a board, and we agreed informally as a board that if you don't agree with a motion that somebody's asking you to vote on electronically, don't agree to vote on the vote electronically, because your voice needs to be heard by the public.
Okay, so then this may be a slight sidetrack, but doesn't that go back to our discussion when we said, when there is a new board member, what do they receive as guidance then, as how what their expectations are, now that they are a director? Wouldn't that be?
Yeah, I can answer that question. We have an orientation meeting that is
Okay.
an all-day meeting that gives guidance. And this having never become, this is our first orientation meeting subsequent to that occurrence. And so our orientation meeting is Wednesday coming, and I will be reviewing the packet to make sure that these things are included in that, so that there are two big issues that we need to be clear about. This one, and the other one is how a liaison is supposed to function. And I'm violating those rules right now by speaking as much as you guys speak and weighing in on things. But I think it's because you've asked for my input based on my experience as a director and the board perspective. So I'm going to zip it.
Yeah, I guess the only thing is if it were defined in the bylaws, there wouldn't be any question. You agree to the meeting, you agree to vote for it.
Okay, Keith, the
We're
homeowner
pretty long.
association, the homeowner association you referred to, Keith, have they gone somewhere other than be livid within the association with their complaint? Have they gone outside, made complaint elsewhere? And what
They have
so
not.
what's the response?
It's a much smaller association, it's a very small community, and it's just an internal ongoing complaint. And people aren't as informed about first of all, they have very, very few bylaws. So it's kind of the wild, wild west the way they're operating. But I know specifically that this issue is going on because we had discussed it in our group, so it was fresh in my mind. And I know some people that live there and are complaining about it. And so no, they have not complained outside the association.
Okay,
Okay, I'm going to have to give you guys the heads up that I have a hard stop at 3 because I have another Teams meeting starting at 3. And so can you give me advice on what to do with this? Or were you saying you'd like it to go to Jeremy for advice?
yeah, that's my suggestion. For example,
Okay,
the current bylaws have as a final sentence, it says it has to be unanimous written consent to take action without a meeting assigned by each director. Okay, you can read that: unanimous consent to take the action without a meeting.
yeah.
In other words, unanimous consent to not have a meeting. Then the next sentence reads, the consent and action shall be filed with the minutes of the board meeting. Yeah, if he wants to interpret, if his interpretation is it's a two-step process, you have to unanimously agree to not meet, to agree without a meeting, take action without a meeting, but the action does not have to be unanimous. Then we just need to revise that last sentence to make sure it's unanimous consent to not meet, and the action taken is in accordance with requirements of the bylaws, or whatever words you want to put in there. But yes.
Okay.
Let's,
Okay, I will do that. I'll take
let's-
it to Jeremy. Thank you.
What the requirement is needs to be clarified.
Okay.
All right, let's, next page. If we're talking about things that are going to go to Jeremy here, I think we can skip over the amenity privileges part of the proposals. All that does is change it to read in so many words, whatever family memberships are offered by the association. It takes out the list of amenities like golf, racket sports, aquatics. I'm not sure what else there may be in there, but instead of listing each of the amenities, it just simply changes it to the family memberships offered by Ocean Pines. And I don't see that as something that we need to ask Colette to take to Jeremy. The next item, Colette, is this issue of what can the board do with regard to ARC guidelines, or not ARC guidelines, I'm sorry, the ARC committee. That's section 15H. Jeremy and I had talked about that several months ago, and he was going to put together a proposal. You know, is that
Has he
still?
done that?
I'm sorry.
Has he done that? Has he-
No. I have
Okay,
not
so
heard
this is
anything.
still an open item on his agenda then. So I will
Okay.
take this up with him.
All right.
Okay.
I'm looking here for something else that we may. Okay. One other item that there are in should be page 16. There is some clarifications for the secretary with regard to petitions. I've skipped over references to manuals. I don't know that that's something that needs to go to Jeremy. If you can turn to page 16 quickly. Paragraph 4.07, this is with regard to review of petitions by the secretary. Within 10 calendar days after a petition is filed, the secretary shall certify, the current reading is, shall certify that the petition meets the requirements of this section, or a public report to the board of directors specifying the basis for rejecting the petition. What I am proposing is that the wording should say the secretary shall certify in writing to the board of directors that the petition meets the requirements of this section, or file a report with the board specifying the basis for rejecting the petition. It's inserting the shall certify in writing to the board, so that there's an official. It doesn't say how to certify. Let's put it that way. The current provision does not say how to certify. It just says certify to the board.
Okay.
Or doesn't even say that. I'm sorry. It says it just says certify that the petition meets. I'm proposing that certify in writing to the board that it meets the requirements. And then the other part of it is when the secretary has certified, it says the board of directors shall consider a petition submitted under section 4.07 at a meeting of the board within 60 days of the petition being filed. I've suggested that it should read, the board of directors shall consider a petition submitted under section 4.07 and certified as valid by the secretary, so that it's clear that what has to be done within 60 days is that a certified petition has to be considered by the board. These are just clarifying what has to be done. They're not changing substantively anything. I really don't think that needs to go to the council for review. I know we're kind of running through this kind of fast, but trying to. Go ahead.
I think it's clear. I agree with it.
Okay. I've skipped over the manuals part because there's one item other than that Colette, we've been kind of hanging on to this associate member thing.
Yeah,
there was
I
gonna
think
be-
you were waiting for the board to make a decision on
Yeah,
that. Is that correct?
yeah,
And so I don't recall, we did not vote on this, but I think we achieved consensus that we're not going to give associate members the same privileges as members when it comes to committee participation and chairing in committee. I
okay.
think that's
Real briefly here, real quick. I concur with that. And my concurrence is based on the executive council meeting more or less a month ago. And there were informal comments made, including director's comments, that I brought it back to the council and said that we were in fact considering this. And it could go to the board for its consideration as well. Well, there are informal comments made by board members, perhaps off the record kind of comments, if you want to put it. I don't think you may not find them in the minutes of this meeting at the next meeting, as well as kind of a who me reception by the executive council itself. It was like the thing had never been discussed before. As far as I'm concerned, it should be considered a non-starter.
Yeah, and I will just affirm that with the board. And if the majority of the board says, no, you got to go back and consider that, I will bring it back to you guys.
Okay. Well, how about if we just consider it, leave it as is unless we hear something different. You can tell us
Yeah.
yes or no at some point in time, but we're not going any further with it.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Agreed. Hey, I'm going to sign off here so I can hop on my other call. Thank you,
Okay.
guys.
Bye.
Okay. And I'll follow up with you, Jim, if I have any questions about my scribbled notes here.
Okay. As I said, I wind up having to watch the video, which is not an easy task, unfortunately. We skipped over the one item we skipped over is the item how it's the pages, it'd be pages 11 and 12 in the proposals document. And this is how the title is how to determine how to identify source references in the bylaws. Again, this is in pages 10 and 11. If I can sort out my papers here. One item, I'm not sure, I'm on the wrong page here. It's not 10 and 11, it's 11 and 12. If you're looking at page 11, for whatever reason, I don't know how this happened. The first part where it's discussing 5.14E and F, there are a couple of lines missing where it goes 514E and F as currently written and so on. The next line goes and lose, and then there's a couple of lines that are blank and updated or superseded by newer volumes. There's missing lines in there. I don't have any idea how that happened when it was copied into the proposals document, but I'll correct that. It's pretty straightforward what we have here, and it's something that we discussed it in any particular length, or at some length, let's put it that way, that we did not want to be referring to specific manuals because of the possibility of them being superseded by some other document, among other things. So do we have any further discussion of this one, of this particular one?
I don't. I think they're clear as provided.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
No, I'm fine with it.
We just make reference to them being the policies, the procedures, the whatever's being documented, but we don't make a specific reference to some document that by name or title, that kind of thing. All right, well, what I can do is I'll forward this one. I'll extract it. I'll also make sure it's correct, got the information filled in where it should be, and send it on to Colette that this is one item that we discussed after she dropped off, and that we, to whatever extent it needs to be referred to, if necessary, if she thinks necessary, refer it to council. And that should be, I'm pretty sure, have taken us all the way through.
Jim,
Yeah,
I know we passed by it. Can we go back to the amenity provisions for just 1 second?
yeah, hang on a second so I can get mine out while we're all,
I have it at page 9.
yeah, it's on page 9.
Okay,
Give me a second.
that's all right.
I have pages scattered around here. Well,
I just, if I may, this was my assigned task.
okay,
And I have no problem with making the change as suggested, which is to eliminate the listed amenities and just make it clear they're entitled to all family membership amenities through family membership. I'll just raise as a larger question to some degree. This provision falls, as I recall, under compensation, where it says members of the board are not compensated, yet they get a free membership to all these, free family membership to all these amenities. There's a basic question as to whether or not they should get a free membership. I don't take a strong stand one way or the other. I'm just pointing out the inconsistency, that's all.
yeah,
Probably it should say the only compensation is.
the issue of this kind of thing, and I think taxes and are the employees of the corporation or not employees, that sort of thing, has been bounced around in various forums, if I can put it as that way. I don't.
Should it say members of the board ... shall not receive a salary for services in connection?
Well, to me, the basic question is whether or not they should get the free family memberships. That's all.
Well, we're using the word compensation in the very first sentence, and we're saying no. But then we go on to say, but we're going to give you this. So I agree that that's a conflict. So I'm wondering if.
Well,
if we
the
change
type is compensation, I believe.
If we say the board of directors and officers should not receive a salary for services in connection, then doesn't that remove the conflict?
Yeah, it's the only compensation. They don't get a salary.
I'm looking to see if there's something in the charter. I thought there was, but it doesn't look like there is. It just talks about the term and the duration of the term.
Well, and we'd have to change more because it says except. So should not receive a salary for services in connection with these positions, period. And then I think the board of directors may authorize blah, blah, and shall be provided with family member. Then I think it makes sense.
Okay, go back and go over that again, Keith, because
the very first sentence of the paragraph, members of the board of directors and officers of the association shall not receive a salary for services in connection with these positions, period. And then I think the rest of it makes sense.
Hang on a second. And at the end here,
Period after positions.
yeah, okay. Delete the following part. All right.
Yes.
It would read, members of the board of directors and officers of the association shall not receive a salary for services in connection with these positions, period. Delete the remainder of the sentence, and that's it. That's the remainder. I mean, that's the change, would be the change.
Yeah, the only question is whether the board members should have free family memberships. And I sort of felt when I drafted it, you know, it seems like it's a question that should come up, but I don't have a strong feeling that they shouldn't. I mean, you know, they put in a lot of time, maybe they should get a benefit, but I'm just saying, I could see where the question would arise.
Yeah, I would have to go back and look at the pre-2008 bylaws. I don't recall if there is a provision like that in the pre-2008 bylaws or not. It of course has at least been in there since 2008. And we're now what, 14 years into it, almost.
I will bet you it's in the earlier versions.
Yeah, I can't get to it on the computer I'm using right now. I
Is
don't
it
think
worded that they have to use one, or is it an optional benefit?
no, it's optional.
It's an optional.
They
They can pick any of them.
could, yeah, that's right. They can pick any of them, and there have been,
But not all of them, right?
yeah, and there has been at least one, and maybe more, director who has declined to do so for, you know, whatever personal reasons.
Well, no, they can get all of them. That's what the language says.
Yeah, oh yeah, they can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Isn't
I
that
don't have a problem
a
with
financial correlate? It could be looked at as a financial. I mean, they're not getting paid something, but they're reaping financial benefits from receiving those family memberships. But I'm not one way or the other for it. I understand, but as a lifelong career volunteer, I don't get perks like that for anything that I've ever done, no matter what. But
I don't want them because you got IRS looking over your shoulder. You don't need it.
Yeah, there is a bylaw or charter provision that doesn't really touch on what we're talking about. All right, well, just my own comment. I think that the family memberships, let me refer to it as that, as a being available to members of the board of directors. That's pretty well embedded in our association now. Now, if this does indeed go to a referendum and people vote on, or members are able to vote on individual proposals, like this would be an individual proposal, it gets voted down. I'm not sure.
The directors might be mad.
Well, if it's voted down, it's an interesting question. If it's voted down, I would think that the result would be the existing provision would remain in effect. Not that you're doing away with 5.11. But that's an interesting perhaps thought to clarify when this as this approach, actually this stuff approaches a referendum. You know, if a provision is voted down, does that not in fact what is in the bylaws now remain there. So
Mhm.
anyway, I'll
Commissions. Yeah.
I'll make this change and add this to the one we were just talking about. I guess actually we're talking about two of them. Two others I'll send on to Colette. In her judgment, does it need to be reviewed with the council? Okay, that's I think takes us through our bylaws proposals. Hang on a second. I think we need to spend a few minutes, and I know we're what, 3:15 or thereabouts. We should spend a couple of minutes on the governance document review. We also need to consider when we're going to have our next meeting. Let me try to get back to where my papers are here. And that's, we don't have, okay, over here. We don't have Josh to flip pages for us, unfortunately. This is going to be maybe kind of a two-way conversation between myself and Bob, but please bear with us for a minute. We need to try to get up to date on some of this stuff. There are 3 resolutions that Colette has for review with the board. One is B07 on petitions. The other 2 are M05 on animal control and M07 on bulkhead waterway maintenance. She's indicated that just snowballing events she was not able to get it on the agenda of the board meeting tomorrow. And she said that she will have these 3 revisions before the board for the board review next month. So that's to be reviewed by the board next month is the status of those 3 revisions. Other considerations, and again, I apologize that maybe it's a conversation between Bob and myself. They're 2 considering the elections committee. One that their C committee resolution needs to be reviewed. That's C08, and I have not sent that out, but I will send that request out. The other is that the M06 resolution needs to be reviewed. And it's overdue for review, actually. Bob, we show the responsible to be the board on that. That actually should be the committee, the elections committee. The elections committee is a standing governing document, governing document committee. They should be responsible for the resolution and make the necessary recommendations to the board. The board wants to come up with something on its own, or a member, the board can do that to any resolution, but the resolution responsibility to be kept up to date should be the elections committee, and I need to send out to them, and I will do so, a notice to review that resolution.
We should change M06 to committee then from
That's
board.
right. Yes.
Okay. It's been like that from time immemorial, but yes, all the notes have been gone to the committee chair.
Okay, I have not yet sent anything out to review the executive council resolution, and I will, I just simply missed it
Okay.
with the bylaws activity. I'll do that. The aquatics committee has gone through some kind of a turnover. There is a new chairman appointment on the board agenda tomorrow for the aquatics committee. And we've been putting off and putting off and putting off asking that committee for review of its resolution. As soon as there's an appointment of a new chair and the name and email address and all that sort of thing is posted on the website, I will ask them to have their resolution, which is C-15, to be reviewed. Unfortunately, Colette is not with us. FO2 and FO3 got stopped at their second reading because of some board concerns. And that was back in November, and we're in the January timeframe, and nothing is showing on the agenda. So I'll have to ask what is happening there. The board either needs to decline to act further or in some manner proceed further with those.
Looks like Josh just joined us.
I'm here. Nice to see everyone.
Josh, we're wrapping up the governance document review.
You guys get the endurance award for sure.
On M02, which is the amenity policies, that's again somewhere along the line I have failed to look at this. I will ask Colette that this be reviewed in due course by the board of directors. This is the resolution that sets forth the various policies regarding the amenities. I'm not sure whether, I haven't taken a close look at it at all recently as to whether there are areas in it that need to be reviewed. I'll do that before sending it out. One final comment that I want to make on this. I have been deferring, and that means procrastinating on something to do with M08, which deals with manuals. I have prepared some background and my recommendation as to what to do with that for review by the committee. I have not sent it out because of just putting it out there in the middle of more priority work that we have going on the bylaws. I will do that. We appear to be perhaps at a point where something like that can be considered, and without a whole lot of time spent on it. But I have not forgotten about it. I do have something that I can send out, my recommendation on what to do about that resolution. To preface my comments, it was a good idea, but it's never really been followed up on and probably doesn't need to be continued. As a resolution, probably doesn't need to be continued. At any rate, we need to schedule another meeting, or our next meeting. It is kind of questionable as to when we're going to get something back that we can look at from the board and/or Jeremy. 2 weeks from now would be what, the 4th, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's everybody feel about with regard to our next meeting? Want to try for another 2 weeks? Or we can, the next board meeting is scheduled to be the 22nd of February.
Is it that Wednesday, the 23rd, I thought?
I'm sorry, 23rd. You're right, 23rd.
I just remember seeing all Wednesdays for their meetings.
It's the 23rd. I've got tomorrow being the 22nd on my mind, the board meeting. That's the 23rd of Wednesday. We go to the 18th, which will be basically a month from now, 4 weeks from now. If we're going to get anything, I would expect us to have it by the 18th. What's the feeling to schedule our next meeting for the 18th, or is anybody interested in the 2 weeks?
February.
I have a conflict on the 18th.
Okay.
I would hope if we were going to get something, we would get it, if the next meeting, the board meeting is the 23rd, be hard for us to get our ducks in a row for the board meeting on the 23rd if we're waiting on Jeremy's recommendations. So my request or thought would be we can set it for the 11th maybe, but if we don't get something from Jeremy, then Jim, you can just reset it. We'll leave it subject to the call of the chair.
Yeah, we can
Okay,
do that.
I agree with that. I see Keith, you were nodding you're good
Yeah.
with it.
I'm good with that.
I'm good with
Laura,
the 11th.
How about Bob?
Should be back from
Oh, I'm sorry,
Florida.
I forgot your vacation, Bob.
You call the meeting. If I could make it, I'll be there either on dial-in or whatever.
All right, we're going for 11th, go for another Microsoft team meeting.
Yeah.
That
And I
good?
think waiting till the 18th would cut us too close. What happens if we feel we need more discussion time or whatever? There's no time to throw in another meeting, you know?
I agree. I agree. The 11th, I think is 11th. We'll set it for 1 o'clock Microsoft team meeting on the 11th. Josh, you still with us or not?
Yes, I'm scheduling that right now.
Okay. All right. Did we miss anything? I hope not. If we have, we can wait till the 11th.
That's right. That's right. I promise not to bring you snow next week, okay? On the
Yeah,
25th, because I'll be a little bit older the next time we see each other.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right, folks.
When you have a
Good
winter
seeing you all.
birthday, you know, there's always that risk of snow, but
All right, everybody, have a good weekend. Stay,
All right.
stay
Have a
warm.
good weekend.
See you
Bye-bye.
guys.
Okay, bye.